Hello, and welcome to another edition of what was the name of the show again, Steve? Can you
It's right
remember?
behind, seriously, it's right behind me. You can't read. I know
Uh,
the expectations are really low, but seriously, right there, right there. You
oh,
can't,
okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, welcome to what's it called? I think it's called Two Old Farts,
making noises.
making noises.
And our guest did that for earlier today, so which we didn't record, but
Yeah,
that's just our thing. So
yeah. Well, our guest today, we're globe trotting again because this show is so global. It's
all 12 of our fans, just let's not get carried
exactly.
away.
And I think we've been to South Africa this week. We're now going to Lithuania. So there's all sorts of stuff happening. Our guest today, I'll let him introduce himself. His CV is so big that I kind of, to be honest, I stopped writing it all down. But I do know that David was a film producer. He's founded and created 19 Questions. He's a sales and leadership coach, and he's got a whole load of other stuff. But I know that he likes to introduce himself. So good afternoon to you, David. Perhaps you'll introduce yourself and off we go.
Very kind. Now, tell me, David, what is your name, David? So I remember.
I'm called David. At
Okay.
least I think I am. I'm unsure about that.
We have other things we call you, but not in front of your face, so you're fine. So
Well, first of all, can you guys hear me okay?
yeah, you're
I'm
good.
actually in a cafe in Vilnius, Lithuania, what I call the New Europe. I should be careful how I say that to David because David is also in the New Europe, just about maybe 500 miles away. Everything's 500 miles away in Europe, rather kilometers. But I first want to say that I'm honored to be among the old farts. I'm not quite sure who's older or younger here.
Oh, I think I win that one.
Well, I won't compete with you. The reason being is that my memory is such that I'll forget to do so. But in any case, I love introducing myself, depending on the right audience, with homage to Steve Martin. I typically tell people, I was born a rich white child from Connecticut. And you may remember that's the opening line from Steve Martin's The Jerk, only it's the opposite side. But anyway, I am originally from the East Coast of Connecticut. I feel like asking them to turn the audio down, but I don't want to impact everybody else. I'm sitting in a cafe. As long as you guys are fine, I'm fine. And I woke up one day in my second year at the Naval Academy, training to ultimately become a naval pilot during the Vietnam War. Only it wasn't really my idea; it was my father's idea. He was a former military officer himself. And when I was,
can I interrupt you, David? Was it your father's idea? Was it your father's idea for the Vietnam War? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Exactly right. Well, I forgot to say that my middle name is Johnson. But I don't share that, but I trust you guys. So anyway, Steve and Bill, yeah, so I like this. This is good. And I have done comedy before. So if I do say something that doesn't make sense,
Well, let us know when you start. So
well, I'll start right now. Can I first give you some feedback on this wonderful branding of yours?
Sure.
Okay, so to continue, that's my only original joke, though I have worked a little bit with Second City and I've done stand-up.
And the nice thing is
our podcast listeners will love that. Of course,
he's here till Thursday. Try the veal. 2 shows, 8 and
That's
10.
right. And one of us is up in the Appalachians right now. I love that show, by the way. Appalachian Emergency Room on Saturday Night Live. That was one of my favorite skits, along with the Subway guys that talk like that at home. That's how they actually talk in real life.
I thought when Billy Crystal was on Saturday Night Live, that was one of the best. I mean, the original cast was great with Chevy and all them, but when Billy Crystal came on and did all his characters, like the baseball, the guy with the Yankee cap, and I was just blown away. So
they brought it to the next level.
Yes,
and, I love that show. I still watch snippets whenever I can.
Yep.
Anyway, at one point I woke up and they told me that they had good news for me. I could fly either ships or submarines. And I was a little confused by that. I had rationalized following my dad's trajectory by being able to go in the airlines, and because I love travel and love women, that's how I justified it. but submarines and ships don't go that way. So I decided, it's a longer story, but I set my sights on some place that was about 1 million miles from the military and my dad. By the way, who's my greatest fan? My dad and I are very close. He's 92. Berkeley. And I didn't realize that Berkeley would be hard and really hard to get into. I think they were turning away 3,000 4.0s a semester at that time. I think I was paying $275 a semester. But anyways, I managed to get myself in as a veteran and on the power of a plane, and almost flunked out pretty quickly. It was really hard, actually. It's a great school. And then I got lucky. Like every one of us that goes to school needs to or hopes to get lucky. A professor liked me, pulled me into her office one day and asked me a question which absolutely changed my life. She said, "Do you like being bald?" And I thought, no, I'm only kidding. She said, "If you had $1 million in the bank and you could do anything, what would you do?" And I said, "I would make movies." Because I made a movie when I was 15 in high school and I loved it. And I would teach because I love what happens to a person's pupils, the way they dilate. When you have an epiphany, or oh my God, you realize for the first time, you know, I got something upstairs. Or really amazing, you realize your life purpose. Because I believe that anybody who realize your purpose in life, you can become a superhero of genius. I really believe that to the core of my soul, but so few people are able to. So I combined the study of film as language and rhetoric as a technology language, studied the Soviet filmmakers that wove together the Soviet Union from 150 tribes and the 15 republics. They all wove together. They created this new kind of cinema called montage that could trick the brain into believing what you were seeing. So they were making movies to show this unified culture around the rights of the individual, socialism, whatever. And I had this insight to apply it to improving American K-12 videos in school, math videos, history videos, because the stuff that I saw was track. I think it's much better these days because they just license stuff from the Discovery Channel and National Geographic. But in the old days, it was pretty darn bad. And you two old farts know exactly what I'm talking about. So I got a very good grade on my thesis, and I was told it was a failure. Now, by the way, you can interrupt me anytime because I don't want to do a long diatribe. That's not really fun. So
you're doing our job great. We're just sitting here looking pretty, and that's a job in itself. So no, this is good.
So David, tell us how it went. Okay. So anyways, why was it a failure? So it was a failure because even though I did really well with everything that they taught me.
Did you get good grades at being a failure?
I actually did.
Yeah.
In the end, I got honors. Why?
Oh.
Because I realized in the end what I was here for. And when you realize your purpose and you reconstruct your education so that it serves your interests, your passion, your drive, then it's not school anymore, it's life. And so I re-engineered school so that I was doing what I loved. And the only thing I didn't do well was the educational part, which they didn't teach me. They accused me of getting my knowledge out of a book in the library, and it's true. So I did wrong.
Kids don't today know what a library is, David. So
yeah. Well, I thought that's where you were supposed to go to get your knowledge in the library. I mean, what's the point of the library apart from some rich guy putting his name on the door? I mean,
well, I was getting it from the library. I don't know if you remember that from age 6. But what happened was I thought that movies could impact all kinds of learning. And I realized how powerful the screen was because, there's only the bullet and the screen for ultimately impacting opinion, changing behavior, etc. And today, the screen is far more powerful than the bullet, if you notice.
Could I, David, the screen, what was important to you then? Like cinema or TV?
No, cinema, TV. There wasn't anything else. This was before video.
Yeah. I can just about think back that far. But I mean, for yourself, what were you interested in doing? Movies, cinema, classic cinema, or TV shows?
Yeah, well, where I was at with my thesis was applying the power of cinema to
Okay.
acquire something called the suspension of disbelief. When you believe what you're seeing, there's no dangling microphone. There's no actor looking at the screen to throw off your identification. The Soviets figured out how to create movies where people would lose their awareness of the fact they're being manipulated and vicariously identify with the characters and the story being told. They created this thing called montage. So my thesis was the application of montage to improving educational media. Got a very good grade, was told it was a failure because my presumption was that movies could teach everything, and it's not true. They don't teach motor skills, they don't teach verbal skills, they don't teach higher order thinking or symbolic learning. They taught the fifth type of learning only, what was then called attitudinal learning. Today it's called biopsychosocial literacy, but what it's really called is mental health. Nobody calls it mental health. Why? Because the lawyers hate it. You tell a young 14-year-old to meditate, she cuts herself, you get a lawsuit against her. The church hates it because you're messing with the world that you can imagine the position is. So mental health is a taboo term, or it's been taboo, but I believed, and I came to the conclusion that the greatest challenge that humanity faces today is the lack of pervasive mental wellness. In fact, all of our challenges that are man-made are derived of the lack of mental wellness. And so my goal was to produce feature films, television, mass media entertainment, and as the other media forms emerged, deploy them, computer intelligence, et cetera, to delivering pervasive mental health across the species. So that became my goal. But I found out pretty quickly nobody would finance my kind of movies. So as a junior at Berkeley, I realized I had to do it myself. So I raised $500,000 for the Berlitz language video with somebody that was a bit of a friend back then. I learned my first big lesson in business: always get a contract. I didn't get my upside. He took it all. So he and I no longer talk. But my upside was actually quite big. A guy came up to me in one of my poetry classes, and he spoke French to me. Came up to me and said, "I heard you're an entrepreneur." What is an entrepreneur? Because that was a French word. I never even heard that word till 1984, cover of Time magazine, Wozniak and Jobs. And it said, American entrepreneurs. I literally never heard that word before. And I go, "What's an entrepreneur?" He goes, "Well, my brother's double PhD in math and physics from Princeton. Me, he, and three other guys are working in our parents' garage. I go back and forth between that school, and we're doing a startup." I go, "What's a startup?" It's, "Well, it's building something." I go, "What are you building?" He goes, "We're doing something called multi-threaded bivariate operating systems." I go, "What is that?" He goes, "Well, some people are starting to call it Windows." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "Trust me." And so anyway, I joined the company. I started writing their manual, and not long thereafter, Microsoft came down and bought us out. We were the first company Microsoft ever bought, and I haven't had a job since then. Hold on a second.
David hasn't had a job since then either, I don't think so. Yeah,
No. I mean, I'm what they call here in Holland an entrepreneur.
That's very funny.
So
Have you had your dinner yet?
she's going
My
to bring
dinner
it
with
down soon, I think,
entrepreneur?
with the entree. The lady that comes, I think it's a lady, where brings the tablets and stuff. So yeah, but they tell me I could be an entrepreneur.
I love that. I love that. And I would love to have dinner with my entrepreneur.
There you go. That is funny.
David,
Right.
cinema, I mean, what was that? I don't know whose quote it is, or whether or not it's been stolen by somebody. That cinema is the opium of the masses, or
Well,
TV is the opium.
It used to be the opium of the masses. I think the opium of the masses is a variety of things. I think that it's movies, television, games, social media, way up there, drugs, sex versus making love, alcohol, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that people do to have various, biochemical stimulants triggered within their body organically to distract them from the lack of meaning and purpose in their life. It's called addiction.
Yeah.
I've been called an addict myself because I have refused every job that I've been offered for 38 years. Instead, in order to finance my own projects, I've been a gigger. These days, they call us something really very Laurence Olivier. They call us digital nomads. But I have been involved. Sorry about that noise, guys.
There's gas from earlier, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Exactly, but it's organic.
That's
Anyway,
it's organic gas.
I've been involved in probably 200 startups.
Right.
I have founder stock in many, many tens and tens of startups, and I have been a typical Silicon Valley guy since really 1983, 84. I was offered a job at Microsoft, which I was told about 4 or 5 years ago probably would have been worth about $100 million if I had not sold any of it. I just let it, split out.
Yeah.
But I
Coulda,
forget
coulda,
that.
woulda, muda. That's what they say.
Oh yeah, no, and I've had lots of job opportunities. I'm because I haven't really had a job, and because I began giving speeches in 1985 on the future of digital media, the future of CD-ROM, the future of this, the future of that, and because I've always been a sociable guy that was pretty good at giving amazing parties. I reached a point pretty quickly where I was well connected across the planet. And I started giving speeches in 85, first in Texas, then in France, then in Taiwan, then in all over the world. Started working for a number of countries. I probably worked for 10 or 15 countries on payrolls. I was on a payroll in Germany for 3 years. I worked a lot in the Canadian government. I was on the payroll of, I was a spy for 22 years on the payroll of TV Globo Brazil as a technology spy. I have no contacts or no connections, but I have wonderful relationships across the planet. So I was able to create a wonderful life for myself, traveling the world, working for companies, governments all over the world while I developed my intellectual property, which is, as you were saying, 19 dash questions. I've got some other properties of my own as well. Most of my activity is in the domain of mental wellness. There's 19-questions.com. There's mental wellness. Let me see, globalmentalwellness.org. I own inner ecology software. I co-own Epiphany Films. All of my brands are social impact. I only do social impact as of 2000. But anyway,
Well, let's wait before you go on. Tell us more about the spy thing, because that's fascinating. Because you're like a movie producer and an entrepreneur. I know, by the way, I was a spy. It's like, it's almost like it's Alfred Hitchcock almost like, right? You should be in one of his movies. So tell us more about the spy thing.
Well, speaking of Alfred Hitchcock, sorry about that.
There you go. I'm sure that one of my favorite movies. That was his best grossing movie ever. Nothing ever made it the money or the appeal of that movie. So Bird.
Yeah. So I got to tell my wife. My wife's calling me.
Okay.
Let me just tell her I'm being interviewed here.
Just say that you're busy with a couple of other old farts.
Yeah,
David,
sure.
And, she'll understand.
Okay.
She said, "Well, those guys again."
Okay, we'll come back.
Yeah.
Back ASAP. Okie dokie. So anyway, yeah. Well, my first exposure to spies, real spies that I know of,
Right.
happened in Asia in 1984. And I'm going to be a little bit careful here if you guys don't mind. But
Please.
I woke up in the middle of a recruitment. I didn't realize what was going on, but as the questions started asking me how patriotic I am and how much I love my country. And this was happening not in the United States. It was happening in a very strategic place. And they happened to know some of the people I knew. And in fact, the people that introduced me were in that business, if you know what I mean. Anyway, the biggest challenge I had to that, and I am patriotic, and I am actually John McCain, Senator McCain's son, and I worked together we produced a couple benefit concerts over the years for veterans, Miami, New York. Anyway, so he once told me, you know, I'm not a Republican like my dad, and I'm not a Democrat like you, I suppose, because you're in the parentheses not said commie pinko media. I'm only kidding, he didn't say that. He assumed because I'm in the media that I might be a little bit more Democratic than Republican. He says, I live for a document that I read every night, which is the American Constitution. He said it's the most amazing political document ever written in its time. And that's the America that I love. And you know something? And he said it was in the 50s or 60s that corporations and others, people that own them, realized they could influence the Constitution with money. And that was the beginning of the end of this amazing experiment called America. I'm not quoting him again by saying the beginning of the end, but I really love that notion because I really think that America was really the most incredible experiment in democracy, freedom, you know, and the evolution of the Constitution over time, the amendments giving women rights and people of color rights, et cetera, until people could really influence politics with money. After that, you know, it's, you know, I think it's become a bit of a mess, you know, whereby there is battle between tribalism and humanism. You know, the individuals, you know, the past and a future where we're all coming together to collaborate to solve these massive problems that we've solved as humans because we didn't realize the amount of impact we could have. But anyway, going back to spies. So, you know, the first recruitment upon me was, you know, in the middle 80s. And I very politely demurred, saying, I can't tell a lie. I didn't want to spend my life looking over my shoulder when I was traveling overseas with my family, things like that. But because I was spending a lot of time overseas, I began to, and then I was, I think in my late 80s, I was pursued by a European spy, a technology spy. And there's a lot of technology spying that goes on. And again, I'm not going to name the country. And this person literally told me, you know, after the seduction was done, you know, you got no value for me. And, you know, so it was kind of an insult, actually. We still have an acquaintance, but I came to the point where I assumed that everybody I meet could be an, you know, intelligence person, but I didn't care. I've just always been very, very clear on my own agenda as an educator. And that's what I am. In fact, when I first met a countryman of David's, Peter Gabriel, I was told before we spoke that I needed to be able to communicate who I was in 1 or 2 words. So I communicated to him in our first call that I'm an educational warrior. And he said, what do you mean educational warrior? And I said, I am committed my life to using mass media to deliver social impact, principally in the area of mental wellness. And he said, I'm an educational warrior too. And it went, you know, quite well from that point. By the way, you guys will both appreciate this. During that first call, I spent 45 minutes repressing the desire to ask if it was really him because I'd been sound asleep when he called. More interestingly enough, he said to me, you know, I'm not a musician. I'm an experienced designer. And I always thought that was brilliant. So
That's awesome.
I think that's
That
really
was the post Genesis, I take it.
it was.
Yeah.
It was. It
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was a huge Genesis fan and still a big fan of Peter Gabriel.
He's a
I
lovely man.
saw him do a live gig in Norwich when they were when you could almost feel the friction between the band, the things that he wanted us to do, you know, all the costumes and moving around and the lighting and everything, and the other guys just wanted to play great music. So
He's
yeah,
a lovely and conscious man, and he's done the work. And you'll hear him talking about it in some of the music, like Digging in the Dirt, for example. But anyway, I ended up at one point waking up in the middle of doing my 19 questions with another person of that world, the spy world, the intelligence world. And one of the reasons why I was able to figure it out is that there's really two classes of people in the intelligence world. There's the analysis, the guys that sit and read everything and analyze the photos and develop the strategy. And then there are the people on the ground. And they're very different people. The analysts tend to be very intellectual, extremely well educated, pretty liberal because they think a lot. You could even argue to the left in some ways, but very intellectual, cerebral. And then there's the folks that they recruit around age 18, 19, 20, not much older, because they want people that have not yet become who they are. They want people that will embed the societal values, the cultural values, the institutional mission values, and make it their own. And so those types of people tend not to ask the types of questions that I ask when I do my 19 questions. And just for those of you that don't know what it is, which would be all of you probably, although I did it for more than 1,000 people around the world in the White House and billionaires, yes, spies, celebrities, and hundreds of CEOs. It's a mythological analysis tool where I ask 19 questions that span your dreams, intelligences, issues from childhood, job experience, etc., all the joy, love, success, accomplishment, broken bones, loss of loved ones, failures, etc. I aggregate what I call your experiential DNA, and I interpolate it into a single 1-minute overarching mythology, which tells you why you're on the planet, what your purpose is, and how to execute. Because I believe when any of us realizes our life purpose, I believe the world will, humanity, the species, will become the Darwinian manifestation that it really should be. And I think we're on a precipice. But at any rate, to close on the spy thing, in 1989, let me see, was it 89? I was recruited because, or maybe it was 90, it was right after I did the movie The Lawnmower Man, 92. Okay. I produced all the display graphics, and I was the main VR consultant because in 89, I designed the world's first virtual reality simulation game. I wrote the first article on the use of VR for education, etc. I was invited to Brazil to give a speech at a university called University of Cândido Mendes by Cândido Mendes himself, who was the nephew of the Bishop of Brazil, from a very wealthy family. And they loved me. I mean, I was giving a lot of speeches. And during one of the speeches, one of the panels, I met a guy named Jose Diaz. The name's actually much longer. Those frisky Brazilians and Portuguese, they love those royal names with like 5 names. Yep. But anyway, he was the genius, head of R&D behind TV Globo, which is the 4th largest TV network in the world, #1 in South America. But nobody knows who they are except in the business because it's Portuguese. It's not English. It's not, Spanish. And he was the genius behind all of the CGI and all of the amazing immersion and VR that they created for 43 years. And he took me on as a technology spy. And one of my first successes for him, and I was literally on their payroll for 22 years, I think it was. I found some DSP technology out of Israel that they were using for missile tracking. And he was able to take those algorithms and interpolate them into the ability to take a football game. And I happen to know what football is, even though I'm American. Okay. And instead of you being in the stadium and seeing 300 ads, if you're at home, you'd see 600 ads because they were able to design and embed digital advertising into the game. So the people at home, so they were making another 5 million a year because of me. And I think that's why they kept me around for a long time. And I did a lot of stuff with them, but I was technically a spy with them. I was a military officer for a little bit of time, and I did, David would appreciate this. I was in Mildenhall Naval Base once.
Yeah, no, Mildenhall. I know Mildenhall really well. Yeah, had American friends who were stationed there.
And I was a Naval Academy midshipman at that time. or just finishing that. And I was in a bar and I started a conversation with an officer of some sort. And I never figured out if he was checking me out as a potential, KGB spy or what, but the conversation, I said a few things here and there that kind of led the conversation in a certain direction. And he started telling me about how he'd seen a plane disappear. Now, this is about 3 or 4 years before the first stealth plane was announced publicly. They did a pretty good job of hiding it for a number of years.
Good
I
pun.
suspect that they were checking me out to see if that would end up, on the other side. So he was probably playing me a little bit, but I was like 22 years old, little bit, everything behind the ears. But, so I've read a lot of Clancy. So I've got that filter up here as well as others, but I stay as far away from putting myself and my family at risk as I can. Having said the above, we are here amidst, 50, 60,000 Ukrainian refugees. We're helping a number of them ourselves. We're about 8 to 10 hours, depending on how you drive, from Kiev. Last week, we were in Gdansk, Poland. Shocked to find out that 1 in 4 of the population there are Ukrainian. We were flying around with a Ukrainian flag and met one woman who literally started crying when she saw the flag. There's so much support, particularly in Eastern Europe. Why? Because if it wasn't for the Ukraine, we would have been next.
Right.
And
I'd have to agree. I'd have to agree with that. It's a huge buffer between the NATO lands and NATO countries and Russia.
And
it's the 1940s all over again.
And there's special significance because here in Lithuania, and my family was involved. There was Voice of America was encouraging the Lithuanian Forest Brothers, which is what they were called, to fight and fight and fight against the Russians. And because of the Forest Brothers and 50,000 of them killed, there's only, I think, 11% of the population here are Russians, because the Russians do what those bee drones do. I don't know if you know about them. There's a larva. They inject their larva into these wasps, and then they take over the wasp's brain. And then so the Russians would go very quickly and embed as many of their population from the poor areas as possible. That way they could justify 20 or 30 years later coming and attacking, because they need to protect them. So there's a small percentage here. There's a much larger percentage, but still manageable in Estonia. Latvia, I believe, is 48%. But do any of these people want to go back? Absolutely not. Did the same thing in Crimea, 80% Russian now. That was 30% Tartars. They were there for 1,000 years or whatever it is. They're all gone. So anyways, I don't know quite where I was going, but in America, it's, the only real relevance there are those that truly appreciate what freedom and democracy really means. And it's kind of hard to know what it means unless you lose it. Right. So that's one population. The second population is anybody that's an immigrant several generations removed, or directly from anywhere in Eastern Europe or Central Europe, so that you have relatives here. And the third population would be people that are actually here. So it's very, I know. Third population would be those that understand what could happen if it did go nuke. Because if it does go nuke, then America is going to be more of a target than Lithuania. So the world is pretty precarious right now. But I'm as optimistic as ever.
But do we think Putin's really that stupid that he wants to go? Do we think Putin really wants to go nuclear? Because that would just destroy everything. Because I think everybody would hit the button. I don't think it would just be targeted to whatever. I think that would just be the global destruction. Because I think everybody's like, oh, cool, we get to use our toys. So,
I had lunch today with a friend of mine. It's very connected internally. and I really shouldn't even say that because I don't, I got to be careful. Obviously, you can see I'm not a professional, but I do know a lot of people. My family is well connected, and the news here is very high quality. So we get a lot of analysis, and I Google Translate the news, and obviously it's much sharper and more immediate here because it relates to us.
Of course.
Lithuania has 8 tanks.
That many, huh?
And I may be wrong, it may be 0, I don't remember.
Okay.
Oh, the point I was making before is Voice of America was broadcasting in the 50s. We're coming, we're coming, we're coming. And they never came.
Right.
And, but because they did that, so many Russians were killed here that they were afraid to come, which is why the percentage is very low here, which is why they're so strong in so many ways. Anyway, Putin, is an oligarch. That's probably the most important way to see him.
Yep.
That he's more than an oligarch, but if you relate oligarchy to mafiosa or autocracy, whatever, it's all related somehow or other. I've been hearing the rumor for many years that he's sick. I mean, it's even heard what it is. He's using body doubles a lot. Who knows what's really true? These guys, I read an article, they lie for practice.
Right.
It's like the guys in Monty Python. How do you know I'm not arguing in my spare time?
Right.
Department of Arguments. So it's impossible to know what to believe, really. But Putin doesn't want to die. And purportedly he's spending absolutely most of his time in a bomb shelter. Very high-end bomb shelter, but that's where he lives. He doesn't want to die.
Right.
I don't want to get too political because I'm close and they got lots of people here. So
Right.
probably want to steer it away. But
so tell us about the time you went to the Playboy Mansion then.
Yeah. So Putin was there.
Yeah, Putin was there. Stalin, sure, they were all there.
Yeah.
So I have a friend. It was his birthday a couple of days ago, who is, I think, senior vice president of satellite for Playboy Television.
Okay.
So he invited me to the mansion. He's a great guy. He's just in it for the business. I'm sure he had a couple of dates, but the kind of people that did that thing tend not to be my kind of people.
Right.
Except that I was programmed to be incredibly attracted to them, of course. But I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff on air. But at any rate, I remember just walking around and just being unable to really talk to anybody because I was frankly really intimidated, and back then I had self-esteem issues. And remember, I'm trained as a psychotherapist. I have my master's in education. I've studied psychotherapy and psychotherapeutic listening and all this stuff. That's my field. I know myself really well. I've had my share of therapy, and it's been really helpful for me. Sorry. No,
Except for the twitch.
But I did go around and I banged noses with Miss, I don't know, October from Michigan. And because it was non-scripted and it was kind of funny, and in reality, she was just another really beautiful 19-year-old who had self-esteem issues like the rest of them, for the most part. Think about why you would do that to yourself.
Right.
It's the same reason people become actors or rock stars. They don't love themselves and they need to be loved by thousands and tens of thousands and millions of people because they don't love themselves unless they do the work, like Peter Gabriel, for example. Anyway, so we did get to talk a little bit, but I don't know what to really say about the experience other than the fact that, as a person with consciousness, studied a lot of Eastern religion, a lot of Buddhism, and had, a lot of understanding of socialization, the power of media, the power of advertising. I more or less felt for these women and truly hoped that they could, ultimately get the therapy and the unconditional, get the love of themselves that they would need, but B, I also hope that they would use the power of the brand that they were building to, support, the world. Because I get asked all the time by young people, because part of my 19 questions process is helping people get into universities. And I've done a lot of that, because what I do is I take young people and I help shape them into young leaders and social impact folks. Because universities, their job is to support the evolution of our species and their countries, et cetera, et cetera. And they don't want just another person who says, I want to go on Wall Street and make money. They need people who are conscious and social impact oriented. And so they're looking for people that don't join the environmental club in 11th grade right before they're applying for college. They want people that really understand that they've got to build a brand. So the first thing I ask people when they say, how do I become an actor or a musician or a model or anything, is, okay, when you've got a following of 1 million people, what's your cause?
Right.
What are you going to do with it? So I begin there. At any rate, that's what I would ask these women, is what are you going to do with your brand when you make it as an actress, if you're able to cross over and et cetera, et cetera. At any rate, we have about 4 or 5 minutes. So why don't you guys take this into a wrap up? I apologize if I haven't let it.
No, you did great. You did. We could have you back for like 25 more times, because it's you have enough to talk about. We haven't even got into like the movies that you've done, which is One More Man and Jobs and the rest of them that are there. And I just saw on IMDb, you got a television series. It looks like that's coming out that you're executive producer on. So there's a lot we can cover however you would like to cover it. But if you have to go, and we do appreciate your time, then we can always do another interview down the road, and we can cover a whole bunch of other things. So, but that's all. That's all you.
My 15-year-old starts school on Thursday.
Yep.
And we've been, it's here in Lithuania. He's going to be the first international student they've ever had that doesn't speak Lithuanian. And he is half Lithuanian, and he's been studying. But it's fabulous, it's exciting, and it's anxiety provoking.
Right.
And he needs me. I'm getting messages that he wants me to come. So that's why you got me in a cafe, is I wanted to be fully present. I like you guys both. I love what you're doing with Noisy Panda. As you know, I've contributed, and I will continue to help however I can. And I love that you gave me an opportunity to insert a little cheerleading for social impact, for realizing your life purpose. I got to do a commercial for 19 questions and globalmentalwellness.org. And
you'll come back, and you'll do more. That's it. And you'll come back.
As Schwarzenegger once said, what the hell? Oh, sorry.
Well,
so I'll leave.
I really hope you come back, David, because I've written this book, and I'm having a great deal of problems with it. It's a book about camouflage, but unfortunately, people can't seem to find it.
Who's this? Is this David or Stephen? I can't see you there.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like that. And I'll just tell you, David, this will help you with that book. I learned the algorithm for humor in a comedy class at Berkeley in 1982. Have I told you what it is? Do you know what it is?
No, tell us.
It's the delta between what you say and what people expect.
Right.
So when I say, as Schwarzenegger once said, what the heck? You're expecting me to say, I'll be back.
Yeah.
When Steve Martin says, some people have a way with words, and some people not have way. Wait, it's not what you expect. So on that note, I will bid you adieu. You didn't expect me to speak French.
I didn't. Congratulations.
I will share the only word you need to know in France, or Belgium for that matter. You can use this, David. You know what the most important word in French is?
No, I'm thrilled to find out. Come on, David.
Here it is. I want to make sure I have a video on me. That was it. It really only works in Paris.
Yeah. And I must say that to our podcast listeners,
you better watch the show.
It
was brilliant. And watch the show. You need to
watch
David doing his.
Thanks,
Thank you, David.
Cheers.
My pleasure and my gratitude as well.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
time and
come back soon, please.
I'll be back. Okay,
Cheers.
ciao, ciao.